I was thinking about reform, and there's an academic from Oxford University called Vlad Bolton. He's done a paper on why people vote for reform and how it's very extensive paper, why people vote for reform and what reform says about itself. And what reform says about itself, university, is three things. First of all, they'll be more progressive on tax, whatever that means, taxation. So they might need a tax burden for less well-paid people, possibly. It's not very clear, but it's just this general thing. The other is that they've got a stricter policies on migration, so they emphasise those. And the third thing is that they're an ordinary person, just like you. That's it. There's nothing else. He's done an exhaustive study of all of their leaflets and pamphlets running in local elections throughout the country. Not including this election, but previously, that they go with those three things. So that's their opinion. Now, one of those is migration, the other is tax, and the other is that they're an ordinary person just like you, even when they're not, even when they're rich, and a multi-millionaire or whatever. So in other words, what he's saying in that paper is they're giving a very simple message that's really easy for people to grasp. It's not too complicated. And that's something we could think about. My sister voted reform in the not the last one, but one before that. And I would not describe her as a racist. She said to me that we had a discussion about it. She said, I've got concerns about migration. Well, if you look at the Labour Party manifesto for the Starmer election, that was top of the agenda for them as a problem, was immigration. That was their main thing, saying it was a serious problem. So the Labour Party was telling my sister that immigration was a serious problem. And the other aspect of that is she hates the Labour Party because of austerity. And she's always previously voted Labour. And there is something in the data to suggest that people initially moved to reform away from the Conservatives, largely, and now there's a process of them moving to reform away from Labour more and more. As the Labour support forward. I have a contact in the British military, and when people start talking about war, he's in the intelligence service, senior officer, and we talk quite openly. He doesn't give me confidential information, and I don't about what's happening on the left, but we do share ideas because he's on the left politically. And he says that the narrative now in British military has gone from when Syria started those years ago, the situation in Syria started. David Cameron was told the British military would not put a boot on the ground in Syria. There's no point, not a single officer in the British Army would support it. Now they're talking about the Russians invading that and Lithuania and those states. And we've got to prepare for that because that would be a different situation. And the problem with Britain is we haven't got the right arms, we haven't got enough arms, so we need to rearm. So he's changed his tune over those years from being, quite moderate sounding to being quite belligerent, actually, and quite, So that's a concern because that's a sort of insight into the way people are thinking. Now, I know you can't use two brains to extrapolate across the world, but that's just where. But that is where you get your insights from, and you get your insights from talking to ordinary people about. Oh yeah, all right, you thought reforms that. Why is that? Not by polarizing them, calling them names, but by trying to have a conversation. It's difficult sometimes because if they are fascists, you can't do that. But not most of them are not fascists. Now. The situation at the last election was that the support for Labour from the previous election halved, support from the Tories significantly fell, and support for reform doubled. And so that was reflected in the results that were to be expected. It wasn't so these results were surprised. I mean, what's happened in general in the polls in the last 6 months is support for reform has fallen by 5%, from 32 down to 27%. It's not increasing, it's slowly falling. But the problem is the support for the Greens has fallen slightly over a single period, only by 2 percentage points, but it hasn't grown from that piece of it. Lib Dems are stable, Labour's stable, the Tories are stable, so they're all around 17–18%. So the fact that Reform's getting 27% means they're a significant, significant player now. But that doesn't mean, as other comrades have said, I think, downstairs especially, that's a fixed position. You know, it's not a fixed position. Personally, I think that Reform will be exposed in the councils because the people who've actually got onto the council are carrying through some really quite extreme actions already. And I think a lot of people just won't stay with that. They'll see through that. We'll see. So my guess is I think support will continue to fall. And I think Andy Burnham is a case of where the Labour Party and the powers that be actually are seeing him as an opportunity to maybe arrest the decline of Labour and to try and, if you like, put on a more happy clappy face for Labour. I think Andy Burnham, if he were Prime Minister, would be better than Starmer overall, with all of his faults that have been mentioned earlier. And that would be a slight step in the right direction, but it's not a direction we're going to go in. It's just a fact that it could be that would be, they may have a slightly better position on the houses, although he didn't build a lot of houses in Manchester. Slightly better position on transport, although he didn't, he let private companies keep going in Manchester. So, there's a lot of stuff between the rhetoric and the reality. And he backs down to capital, and he's been chosen to. So, I wouldn't expect him to be, if you like, the front of a new party in the working class. So I'm saying that right now. That's why we've got to keep doing what we're doing. But nor are the Greens. I mean, people downstairs were saying that very definitely. When I was at that march, Polanski was speaking, a big march, put together march a few months ago. And Polanski was speaking. He was speaking pure liberal democracy. No question about it. And they backtracked on nationalisation. Someone else, people saying on NATO. Someone.
The nationalisation of the energy companies.
No, the only one the Greens now are definite about is water. The others will, and Polanski said this on the platform, and the others would be some kind of public-private cooperative arrangement. And we know what that means. That's a disaster. So, he's backed away from that because he's a liberal Democrat. He's not. On social issues, he's more progressive. But on economics, he's a liberal Democrat. So we'll see. The threat of the far right is still there. People speaking here is that the biggest motivation for that has been the fact that Labour's taken a very poor policy on migration. That has given the far right far more confidence than Nigel Farage could ever give. When Keir Starmer's coming out with what is basically racist, in my opinion, then it's giving encouragement and confidence to people with far right ideas, and that's what I've seen. So people say things now they would never have said pre-Starmer. And I hear it all the time, and so that's a big problem. I remember saying that at the time, and I think Dave was right when he was talking about building in communities, because I know that's what around Dave took a lot of, and it's something I could do more of. But also in our unions, and also in our in our trades councils and so on and so forth. I've eventually managed to get a discussion in the regional TUC on the relationship with the TUC and the Labour Party. It's taken me a year to get that discussion, even discussed at the regional branch meeting. because there was so much opposition to it. But actually, that now has kind of forgotten that opposition. It's not been there. So that's a bit of an introduction. But I've got this sort of list of questions. I mean, they're just a set of questions I wrote down one evening, and the first two are really: do we need a mass party of the working class? Number two is, has your party got a future as a mass party of the working class? So, in answer to question one, do we need a party of the working class? I was hoping not to actually discuss that, because I think we've already kind of discussed that. And would people like to indicate if they agree that we need a mass work party of the working class?
No.
Well, it's just, I think it's better that people indicate it, and then we know where we stand. So that's through. So the next one is, has your party got a future as a mass party of the working class? Now, if the answer to question two is yes, then we should consider the following questions. And if the answer to question two is no, then there's another set of questions to consider. And also, comrades, I've written these questions down. You can ask or suggest any questions you like. It's not my discussion, it's your discussion. And I've only done this to kind of get a start on it. So that second question, has your party got a future as a mass party of the working class? There's a yes, or there's a no, or there's a don't, isn't there?